In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Up everyone, Nestor Licanto here with another edition of In Full Zoom. And this week, we're going to focus a little bit as we dive head first into this new year. The economy for 2020, the year we want to forget, but we'll never forget. And 2021, hopefully it'll be a better one. And our guests this week are from the University of Guam, economics professor, Dr. Roseanne Jones, and the chief economist for the Department of Labor, Gary Hiles. Thanks for joining us, guys. Let me start with you, Dr. Jones, just to add a little bit of context to this. Maybe if we can have sort of a year-on-year comparison of 2020 with the previous year, 2019, and just will give us an example of just how bad it went for us in 2020. Can you just start us off there?
Sure. Many of the economic impacts and the changes that we saw from 2019 to 2020 are obvious. We are primarily a tourism and economy, and that sector was particularly hard hit. The tourism sector with accommodation, you see it in the hotels, the hospitality, food and beverage sector. You see travel services and related retail. They are all the ones who are seeing job losses, and also closures and just major disruptions to their industry. So a very significant change from 2019 to 2020, which is very apparent to us. Business revenues have declined generally, not only from the tourism sector, but overall business revenues have declined. Worker incomes have also declined, and as a result, tax collections from business revenue and income revenue and tourism-related sectors have also significantly been reduced. We see some other interesting things personally. We are picking up that more people are using credit and debit cards for their transactions, a difference from 2019 to 2020. And part of that may be attributed to the concern about handling money in the early days of COVID and whether you could get COVID from the transfer of touching things. So we saw this shift to plastic and as time went on, we also saw that some families were coming under pressure, financial pressure, in which they needed to have better timing of their payments. And so they began to use credit cards more often in 2020 than in 2019. So we also saw some good news. We saw that this 2019 to 2020, we saw savings rates increase. Now, part of that was because of the stimulus and the subsidies for households and businesses. And this time around, people learned from 2008, where in 2018, when we had some changes in financial situations, people learned that this one was going to be different. COVID was different, and their behaviors adapted where they went into more savings. So I think that was the year in looking at businesses and household behaviors. But one final thing, we also saw overall economic vulnerabilities revealed, that we had to become more self-reliant. We had to depend on what we have right here, right now, in ways that we hadn't seen before, that everything became very local. And especially for healthcare. It was the first time that we realized we couldn't go elsewhere. We couldn't use our extended network to rely on the kinds of services that we were able to use in 2019. So everything became more, what do we have here and how do we use it? And as a result of that, we exposed some vulnerabilities, but also some opportunities.
Yeah, so, and Gary, as a longtime chief economist at the Department of Labor, you kind of use things in part from the government perspective. What can you add to what Dr. Jones has laid out here?
Yeah, she mentioned the savings rate has increased. That's what I'm understanding anecdotally from the banking industry. Is there's two components. One is some people that lack business revenue would be running up more debt. On the other side, some people that are receive more revenue from federal benefits than they're normally accustomed to, and the lack of places to spend money and the concern about needing to hang on to it, their savings has gone up. So if you put the two together, there's a net increase, I understand, in savings. That's good in terms of providing people security because they've got a little nest egg. So if there's delays, which I expect there will be in the disbursement of new federal funding, that they have a little bit of a cushion. But it's also provided a little bit of a drag that if those monies were designed to stimulate the economy, that all of the money didn't get spent in the economy, and that contributed to the business revenues and activity not being supported as well as you would have expected from that level of federal spending.
Yeah, and Dr. Jones, I think you alluded to it. There were some bright spots. There were, of course, many industries that were negatively affected. But what are some specific industries that may have kind of, I guess, lack of a better word, benefited from the pandemic?
I'm not sure that we would say certain industries benefited. I think we saw an interesting change from inside outside. We saw businesses that were catering to our local markets doing okay, and those that were catering to international and tourism markets not so well. So I would look at that inside outside, who benefited from this, because we still had need for services. We still needed to go to clinics and healthcare, and we needed to go to grocery stores and daily living. So those industries did better. But I also think that as a broad stroke on this, I'd say the bright spot was we became more entrepreneurial. We began to think differently. We began to hustle and change and create and look for new ways of doing business. And we had a lot of help from the consumer sector, who was frightened to go into business as usual. And so businesses had to adapt to the consumer preferences by saying, let's have door-to-door delivery, let's have curbside pickup, let's have outdoor restaurants. So things that were previously held in controlled indoor spaces moved outdoors. And I think there was this shift in thinking to attract consumers, which was more towards the idea of entrepreneurs. And I think some of the entrepreneurs have done really well.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
And Gary, we relied very heavily because of the drop in tourism on federal spending, the second pillar, if you will, of our two-legged economy. If that, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, we need that to continue going into 2021, don't we?
Absolutely. The latest report from Bureau of Budget and Management Research shows Federal CARES Act and COVID-19 programs through October 31st spent or obligated $975 million on Guam. That's just under $1 billion. By now, it's been over $1 billion. So that's been a huge impact. One of the largest areas is the unemployment compensation program that offset much, but not all of the lost earnings due to the downturn. It's not because of COVID, but maybe in spite of it, construction employment has increased. It's a surprising number of local building projects and federal military related projects that are ongoing and ramping up with the Marine base relocation construction activities. So they're ramping up slower than previously expected, but they're still ramping up. And
Yeah.
today is a lot of uncertainty about what's happening with the federal funds and the stimulus and relief funds was resolved today with the president signing the COVID relief bill, so that we have certainty that the unemployment compensation will continue until March. The evictions will be delayed for another month at least. So this will give, and also the $600 per person stimulus payment. So in the short term, we have an assurance that there'll be money coming shortly, so people can hold off on drastic action, and they'll have money coming in probably in about the amounts that we've been having in the last few months, so that we'll see in the economy in the very short term probably a continuation of about what we have now. But with the president's push for the $2,000 stimulus, it just passed the House of Representatives by a 2/3 vote, just barely. So that means I did the calculation, about a third of the Republicans signed on to it. So that gives some indication that I understand if it's disputed, it has to get a 60% vote in the House, or excuse me, in the Senate to pass. If that many Republicans back what the president as opposed to opposing the $2,000 stimulus, it looks like it's a big maybe. It may or may not go. But at least it's in the realm of possibility, where it didn't seem like it was a day ago. And that could be huge.
Yeah, and if I can ask maybe, and maybe if I can ask both of you to kind of weigh in here on the importance of, obviously the Congress has seen the importance of getting money into people's hands, and sort of how that impacts the economy as a whole in terms of that so-called multiplier effect.
Okay, well,
You want to tackle that, Gary? Or?
Well, the first thing in spending is people have to have money in order to spend it. So the business receipts depends on, especially with the lack of tourists, it depends on the government and the federal, local, and resident population expenditures. So the first thing for the consumers to spend money is they have to have it. And if they get a lot of stimulus funds, the second thing is just because they have it doesn't mean they spend it, because they may save it because of uncertainty about future. So a portion of that won't get spent, but also the spending depends on what's open, and there may be hesitancy to go to places, or they're restricted because of the COVID health closures and things. So that's also a restriction on spending.
Yeah, Dr. Jones, what do you think to that?
To add to that, I'm noticing kind of supply issues, especially following the holidays. So even if folks do have the money to spend, they need to have merchandise to spend it on. How quickly we can replenish that merchandise and also that need. There have been some economists who have said that the $2,000 stimulus would actually be more than is needed, and may actually introduce a bit of harm with inflation, and maybe setting aside too much out of the circular economy and spending it. So we may see an increased savings rate, which wouldn't be bad, but we may not see that spending multiplier to the same degree. So at $2,000, the business industries know that people are going to have money. And as a result, as in past practices, when businesses know that there's money flowing in the economy, then prices tend to go up a bit, because especially in this case, more dollars chasing few goods. And so therefore it's going to benefit businesses to be able to raise their prices. Not that a bit of inflation wouldn't be helpful, we just have to watch that it doesn't get too distorted.
Yeah, and of course, federal assistance is not going to last forever. And so at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to need to fix the tourism industry up from the bootstraps and get that going again? How do you see that playing out in 2021?
I've said before that we will ease into 2021. We will transition from 20 to 21, and early 21 is going to look somewhat like 20, the end of 20. And with the rollout of the vaccine, and particularly for Guam, if our numbers continue to stay low, if we make really great progress on eradicating the disease from Guam, I think you'll see more confidence from consumers to spend time doing other things like entertaining. So we'll see a transition slowly from going out for the necessities to going out for the things that you'd like to have, and the building acquaintances and entertainment, and that sector beginning to unfold. Good thing for the local tourism will be to see opening up and larger numbers of people being able to go and participate in that. I see that rolling out maybe first quarter of 2021. I think there's going to be all eyes on that first quarter to see how well we're doing. That looks stable. The next quarter is we'll begin to take on more activities we used to know them. I see the first opportunity looking at spring break, looking at travel opportunities there. And certainly a lot of people are planning for summer travel. The number one thing that they want to do is go somewhere. So that's on everybody's list for 2021. They want to go somewhere. I think there's a lot of pent-up desire to do that. And hopefully we'll see some tourism beginning to pick up through the summer months. Again, if we can get a handle on COVID, not just us, but the region. It's a global pandemic. First come here. So I think we'll begin to see that if the vaccine is successful, if people take it, if we can get some traction going. And then I see the remainder of 2021 playing catch up. But I also see that people have had a long time to learn differently about going to work, about spending, about what they need, don't need, and they're rethinking their life as they used to have it for the better, saying, do I really want to go back into that rat race? Do I really want to stop having curbside pickup or my meals delivered? Some people have said, I'll never go back inside. I want to go through the drive-through. We've learned new ways of interacting with our businesses, and new ways of working, and new ways of learning and going to school. And the question will be probably for this first half of 2021, will we all go back to the ways that we used to have, or will we begin to adapt and modify, and it will be a little bit of both. So we'll be watching those behaviors also for 2021.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you a little later, is what would be some of the lasting impact of the pandemic. You kind of laid it out very nicely there. Gary, I wanted to ask you, in addition to tourism, we rely heavily, of course, on military spending, and we did get a bit of a boost by the NDAA, which I believe the Congress is set to override the president's veto of. And in that National Defense Authorization Act, we had a provision that will allow for H-2B foreign skilled labor to work outside of the fence. Previously, it had only been for projects inside the fence. So what's your visibility on that, and how do you see that impacting private sector projects going forward, particularly in 2021?
Yeah, in the short term, the need for labor is based on the contracts already issued in building permits. And since those are up, I expect that there's a pent-up demand that will result in increase in the number of H2 workers on private sector projects, and as well as military. And I'm looking for continuing increase in construction sector, and
Yeah.
that provision will help facilitate that.
Yeah, and I know you track the specific projects. I know just offhand, there's that Don Quixote at the corner of Marine Drive and Airport Road. That's one of the bigger projects. What are some of the other ones? And can you talk about Don Quixote as well? What do you
Right
know
now,
about it?
the airport, the third floor is under construction. If you drive by there, you can see some big progress. And Ross is opening up an Agania shopping center. That's the most immediate.
Yeah, so there are some positive things. I think also is it Coast 360 is also at the corner of where GTA is. That's also in the works. So there are some projects, construction projects, and some smaller housing subdivisions. So I mean, it's not a completely bleak picture in terms of investments. I think money's cheap, right? I've heard that said that's an encouraging sign of cheap money for people who have money to build things. Is that what you're seeing as well?
That's correct. And that's helping drive housing prices higher because of the low cost of interest for people that can buy. But the purchasing of houses is also constrained by people not having jobs. So even if they get a stimulus bill, that's great for the spending money and the food and the rent, but it's not a secure income that you can go out and buy a house and make a commitment to a mortgage if the income is uncertain. The same thing is occurring for businesses. If they're not sure how long it's going to take for tourism to recover, they may be on a wait and see basis for projects related to tourism. So that's probably a damper on that investment. Even though the money's cheap, you're not sure if you want to go ahead at this time.
Right. And Dr. Jones, so let's bring this down to the individual families level. What can folks expect from the economy in 2021? What should they be looking out for? What do they need to do maybe to help ensure their family's financial stability during what I expect will be still continue to be a trying time in 2021?
Yeah, we are wrapping up our business and residential survey, and we're not quite ready to release the findings there because we still need to look at all of the data and think about it. But some of the things that have surfaced are that household sizes have increased. And what has also become somewhat apparent is those most impacted by job loss and job reductions have been those under the age of 39. So that's an important segment of the workforce. It's the younger part of the workforce that we need to get to, and thinking about how we can give some assurance to households that are of that age group, and looking at the dynamics of multi-generational households and the expansion there. But one of the most critical things for us in this finding, and maybe a lot of it will be resolved with the new stimulus, is the number of people indicating food insecurity, that they've gone hungry, that they can't afford food, that that's really troubling and quite an unusual finding, one that we did not expect to see. And where we began to see that was in households without children. It seems like we're doing a pretty good job with our WIC program and our SNAP program, but for individuals and just a two-person household, they seem to be really struggling with food issues. And so I think that's something that we need to look at. We also are seeing people who do have money, as you say, getting attracted by the stock market, by investing. It's not for everyone, but we're seeing more people becoming interested in it, and it's run up in recent values. And so people are beginning to say, with this extra money that I have, I just don't want to leave it parked in the bank, in a savings account. I want to begin to invest it for more longer term investments, which is really a great thing for our households. And that's going to take some education and some caution and care where that's handled properly, so that households have another income stream to bolster them. We're seeing that across the country, where now households are also getting that third leg of their income support from investments. So it's not just their house and not just wages, but it's now more getting attracted to how my money can make. So I think we'll be looking at that for households in the future.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
I'd also like to introduce a colleague of mine who's joined us on this call. His name's Dr. Kuan Chen. And Dr. Chen is an ag economist, and I think this is a perfect segue he does a lot with the outreach on Guam, and is in touch with the households here, and does things with the farmers co-op and others. So Dr. Chen, do you have anything to add to maybe something that I've brought up about this food insecurity, or what households and businesses are up to?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Dr. Jones. So thank you. I think this is a great timing especially for locally farmers to get introduced their locally grown products, and consumer care more about locally grown products, also the food security. So many consumers start planning their own backyard farming, but also they most support locally farmer. So I think this will help our agriculture industry. Also, the government also focus more on agriculture and aquaculture. So this is a really good example for we need another support just beside the tourism industry. So I'm pretty sure this will be really beneficial to our economy on Guam.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think Dr. Jones obviously is very correct in saying that I think food security is one of the biggest concerns going forward. And we can see it already, the number of people that are lining up for the government of Guam's federal government's distribution of food. We can just see that already happening. We've only got a minute left, Gary, and I just wanted to finish with you as the labor economist. You think getting people back to work is going to be the key to this whole economic recovery, and will that happen this coming year?
I think we're going to have a transition process. In order for that to happen, tourism has to rebound. And there's some hopeful signs with the COVID vaccine and testing. United has flights going from San Francisco now to Hawaii, but they have to get a COVID test. The tourism recovery is kind of challenging because not only does Guam have to have the COVID situation under control, but so do the Asian countries of Korea and Japan, and they're having difficulties right now. So with testing, even though we still have a COVID issue, we may be able to start getting things going a little bit. But in addition to food insecurity, we did a survey, an additional question in our unemployment survey. We found that while some companies had maintained their medical insurance, even though the employees were laid off, the majority that lost their jobs are no longer getting medical insurance. So we have a a big gap where people aren't able to get affordable coverage, and that may have to be picked up by public health, MIP, or other programs that people just won't get the preventative care that they need.
All right. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. I know 2021 is going to be still a challenge from all indications, but I think we're at the start of a recovery, a meaningful recovery, and hopefully it'll take off sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Nestor Licanto. That's In Full Zoom for this week. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.